Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Welcome back to Reimagining Love. I am so glad that you're here. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Andrea Miller to the podcast. Andrea is the founder and CEO of YourTango, an independent, purpose-driven publisher focused on love, relationships, emotional wellness, and self-empowerment. As Andrea describes it, YourTango is a place to explore love and relationships beyond typical online listicles that promise quick solutions to complex topics. Today, YourTango provides online resources and reaches over 40 million people from all around the world each month. In founding YourTango, Andrea blended her acute business skills with her passion for relational wellness. Andrea believes that we need to focus on relational health as much as we focus on our physical and mental well-being. And she's therefore dedicated her life to connecting her audience with relationship experts and celebrating relational wisdom. Andrea is also the author of Radical Acceptance, The Secret to Happy, Lasting Love. And she's the host of the podcast, Open Relationships, Transforming Together. Earlier this year, I was a guest on Andrea's podcast, and today we are bringing it full circle by having her here on Reimagining Love. Andrea is a quintessential seeker. Seeker is a term that the fabulous Elizabeth Lesser uses to describe those of us who are on this journey of introspection and healing. So as a seeker, Andrea is very clearly committed to the lifelong practice of continually learning more and more about relationships. And in our conversation, she invites us into her journey of opening herself up to life's lessons, including her most recent ahas about why we need to stop protecting ourselves from this idea that we are imperfect. When we allow ourselves to be wrong, we can drop our agendas, loosen our defensiveness, and meet people where they are. And that's where we are being truly relational. And in this conversation, I checked in with Andrea about a challenge that she gave herself that emerged from my time on her podcast. And together, we discussed the importance of actively making space for repair and feedback in our important relationships. I hope that you enjoy this conversation. Andrea, thank you for taking the time to be here with me today.
I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this.
You had me over to, your house, your virtual house, and now I have you in my house. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have you here on Reimagining Love.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I feel like I've been getting to know you through friends we have in common and reading your book, Love Every Day. Almost every day. There are a few days where I'm waking up late and I don't get to it, but almost every day I have a little bit of you in my life just by reading your daily wisdom. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, that's so nice to hear. I love to be part of your routine. And I can't wait to talk to you about, because you're such a synthesizer. You have connected with so many of the voices in this field, and you've just been a seeker, as Elizabeth Lesser would call it. You've been a seeker. You've been kind of gleaning all these insights and pulling them together. So I can't wait to get into all that. But I want to start by asking you the question that I ask all of the guests on our show. Are you ready for the relational self-awareness question?
I am.
Okay. So Andrea, how are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
I've got two answers, and they are applicable to all of my important relationships, my husband, my kids, my team. And so the first one I'll say, since my kids were little, they're 11 and 14 now. Since they were little, I would call them my little Buddhas because they taught me so much. And I am a type triple A Aries. I'm intense. And I really had to work hard to be more patient and all those things. And so as I've gotten older, this idea that I've developed is called the uninvited Buddha. And there are probably there are certainly analogies in other traditions and so forth, but I call it the uninvited Buddha. And whether it's my husband or my kids or somebody is annoying me, and I say to myself, oh my gosh, and I'm resisting and maybe even resentful. They're not doing what I want, right? They're being annoying. Even if there's nothing outwardly happening, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling judgmental. I'm blaming them. Like, weren't you more like me, right? Like that stuff that's so common. So I came up with this idea of the uninvited Buddha because what I know for sure is that the people around us have so much to teach us. And I made the mistake for so long in, the fight, the flight, like all those other responses when we're feeling uncomfortable that I said, okay, if my kids are my Buddhas, right? They're teaching me a lot. I mean, how can I really extend that metaphor? And over time, this idea of uninvited, because it's like, I'm not looking for this wisdom, but here it is. And the truth is actually, so you called me a seeker. The truth is I am seeking that wisdom. I do want to become the best version of myself. And my husband, my kids, sometimes my team members, siblings, parents, they've shown me those painful blind spots and they've awakened those parts of myself that are difficult. So bottom line for me with the uninvited Buddha, where something is happening relationally with somebody else in my life, I'm uncomfortable. My impulse is to blame and judge. And then I say to myself, oh, they have something important to teach me about me. And honestly, 99% of the time, the moment that I remember that, it's like my energy shifts. And, we're all electromagnetic beings. It's like, oh, I can feel that shift physiologically. And then it makes me more skillful and resourceful. And, if something needs to get addressed, then I'm in a better position to do that. If it's, hey, this is just on me and I need to reframe it. I mean, in any case, no matter what, when I think uninvited Buddha, this person has something to teach me. I mean, honestly, at times, my kids, like I said, my kids are 11 and 14. My 14-year-old, I'll sit there and think to myself, he's not your enemy, Andrea. He's your son.
Right.
I love and adore like with you. You got a close bond. I mean, I'm one of these moms that kind of lives for her sons. I'm not too proud to admit it.
Right.
But then there's the triggers, and that seems like Mother Nature has baked that in for a reason. So I'll literally think, oh my God, you're behaving as though this 14-year-old is your enemy, and he is anything but. He is trying his hardest, right? So even that, because I'm like, even beyond being a triple type A Aries, I'm somebody who has been very achievement oriented and putting so much pressure on myself. And I'll find myself putting, very unconsciously putting pressure on my kids and expecting them to be more like me and doers and achievement oriented. And it's like, Andrea, you don't want that. Like you want your kids to be successful and hardworking and all those good things, but you don't want them to be driven like you were driven. So what are you doing?
That's right. That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
And those are, I mean, honestly, I'm a almost 53-year-old seeker. I've been at this for a long time. And I mean, there's still plenty for me to learn. So when I think about the uninvited Buddha framework, it's, okay, these people are gifts in my life to teach me something. And yes, there's discomfort. And, it's so much easier to blame and it's all them, but it's not. That's the first way that I've been reimagining love. And then the second one, I call it the 0.1% rule. And this has also been a game changer in my marriage with my kids, with a bunch of people. So my husband will tell me I'm micromanaging, or he'll accuse me of something. And in the past, I'd be so defensive and I couldn't hear him. Now I'll either say it out loud or I'll think to myself, could that be at least 0.1% true? That's a teeny tiny, like a little speck. Could there be a speck of truth in that? And if so, then I can say, oh, I can see that. And again, that, like, it's that. It changes it because it makes space for their perceptions. And to me, it does really two brilliant things. One, it makes space for their perceptions. And unless they're a terrible human being and a total idiot, well, then their perception matters. And if they're a total idiot and a terrible human being, then why are you in relationship with them, right? Then that begs the question. Then that's on you. But if it's your husband, your kid, a coworker, people you care about, you can't just say, "Well, you're just an idiot, and I'm going to write you off." As much as like maybe that's a sound bubble in your head. So it makes space for their perception. But again, for me, it has really helped me see blind spots in myself that have been hard for me to see. And the more I've given permission for somebody else's perception, it's like not it's saying to them, "Hey, I'm making space for you," but internally it's saying, "Oh, Andrea, I've had this like major armor that has protected me, and yet it's also prevented greater intimacy and closeness with people, a lot of people that I care about." So for me to say, if what they're telling me is at least 0.1% true, then there's something about me that helps me be more human and more gentle with myself. And I feel like there's a lot on toxic perfectionism, and I mean, I've certainly experienced toxic perfectionism. It's like, ooh, it's painful to be wrong. And I try so hard to be the good girl and to be right, right? So it's like when I feel like someone's accusing me of something, especially because I try so hard to be conscientious, that I can't hear them because it's like it's going to shatter my identity. Well, that helped me, and it was adaptive for some time, but now it's such a handicap. And so I've really had to learn the hard way to make that space. And honestly, I coach other people as well sometimes, and I've used this 0.1% technique with other people, and it's like a game changer because they'll go, "Oh, like, can that just be 0.1% true?" And by the way, even like Trump's an idiot. Can it just be 0.1% true? Biden's an idiot. Can that just be 0.1? You can't say no. I mean, of course, everybody. In fact, Stan Tatkin, again, I don't know why I'm like on the like Stan parade. He talks about we're all a-holes. I mean, and it's like, oh, thank you for keeping it real, Stan. Like, you're telling the truth. And we all are at times, not because we want to be or we mean to be or we're terrible people, but just at times life gets the best of us. So when I think about this 0.1% way of saying, okay, I'm going to be open to what this person is saying about me, because I can learn something about myself. And if I can make space for their perception, I feel like that's a great gift. I see you, I hear you, I'm making space for you. Okay, now we can go somewhere together. But if I can't even agree that it's your perception, you're telling me I'm a micromanager, or I'm not listening, or I'm not pulling my weight, you're totally wrong. Well, you can't really go anywhere with that.
No, there's nowhere to go. And in fact, I think you're making one of the really interesting things about what you're saying about toxic perfectionism is that when our response is defensiveness and deflection, the toxic perfectionism wins. Because the message that we give ourselves is that we must be protected against the idea that we're imperfect. And so in that interaction, the perfectionism has won, like self-compassion has lost. You're speaking to the relational damage, which of course there's relational damage because the other person feels unheard, disregarded, like you have a big X in front of you. But there's also something quite sad that's happening like inside of us when we do that, which is we reinforce the belief that the only way to be okay is to be perfect and to keep scrambling and keep hustling.
Oh my God, I have accused myself of dehumanizing myself, right? And so many of us have as a coping mechanism. So when I think about where that all kind of naturally, if you're like kind of going back to the root, where all that naturally comes from, it's for me scary to be fully seen because I felt so much self-doubt, and I was criticized a lot growing up. And it's like, so I've got to, it's like I'm tough in a lot of ways. And then like a lot of us also kind of thin-skinned. So then it's exciting to do the work and go, oh, no, well, that's not true. Right. And now it becomes a bit of a superpower because if I'm not thin skinned and I'm not so fragile, then I can be that much more effective. I can be that much more open and really seen. And so just that experience, and thanks for calling that out, because that really has become part of me becoming much more whole. And then I'm more effective as a leader. I'm more effective as a mom. It's like when I don't have so much to protect, that's the game changer.
Okay, So I want you to tell us about your background and how did you get to this? The you here with your uninvited Buddha and your 0.1%. So give us a little more context around the journey through your work today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll try to rewind and keep it relatively concise. I started my career in finance and engineering, and I was a complete media outsider when I went to Columbia Business School. I had my proverbial aha. I became the managing editor of our school newspaper. I loved it. I hosted a poetry contest. I mean, it was just like, oh, this is so cool. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so I thought, oh, maybe I want to start my own business. And as I looked at the crowded media landscape, again, this was over 20 years ago, so much of what I saw could be categorized, especially targeting women, reduced down to things like 59 ways to please your man, 17 tricky ways to get him to propose to you, just lose 10 pounds and you'll be happy. And I thought none of that content ever appealed to me, nor the women that I was close to. What was endlessly appealing and challenging and triumphant and heartbreaking and everything in between came back again and again to love and relationships. And at that point, you had Oprah and Cosmo and Glamour and all these different publications, but it still felt like there was a lot of white space. And then, of course, you had all these best-selling books that are like Bible, Getting the Love You Want, and The Truth About Love, and A Return to Love, and all these great books. So I knew there was a large audience for it, but I just felt like to create a publishing business where love and relationships was at its center, or at its heart, really, that there was an opportunity for that. And so I went out to raise venture capital. As I always say, I'm part of the 97% of women that failed to raise venture capital, despite my, MBA from Columbia and pretty darn good credentials and a, very solid business plan and all that stuff. And honestly, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. So for any entrepreneurs out there, anybody that's like having that short or medium term setback or disappointment, oh my gosh, one of the biggest things that I always say to myself, and again, I'm in my 50s now, that just trust, right? Like you don't know what's going to come. And in my case, what those of us who are in the publishing and media industry know is that, yes, there was a ton of venture capital that was poured into businesses, but a lot of those businesses have either failed or are totally on the rocks because so much of that venture capital was grow fast, get big fast, don't worry about profitability. Well, we didn't have that luxury. And I was fortunate. My husband made an investment early on, and some wonderful people and friends and family got behind me. And so we did have some outside capital, enough to get going. And it took a long time, but then eventually we became profitable. And I say all this because had we just had endless cash, I don't think we would be here anymore, because instead we really had to be very, very resourceful. We had to think about what can we do with less and, less cash, but we've got the world's greatest team. I mean, we have so much talent. My team was virtual way before the pandemic. We've been virtual for almost 10 years. I mean, it saved on office space. And, we were hiring people outside of these major metropolises where the cost of living is lower. And so I was driven all the while knowing the key role that relationships have in our lives. I mean, it's like the water we swim in, the air that we breathe, we take it for granted. And that's why I love your work, Alexandra. I mean, just relational wellness, it feels like it's just finally becoming, yes, your work and Terry Real and Brene Brown. I mean, there's like pockets of it, but it just doesn't feel like people are taking their relational wellness as seriously as they are their exercise and, diet and mental health. And yet it's all inextricably linked. So anyway, long story short is we struggled and, really fought our way to get to profitability, and all the while building a great audience. Now we reach between 40 to 50 million people per month with our content, our stories and advice and videos at YourTango.com, and then, through TikTok and MSN and the other partnerships that we have. And all that has paved the way. I wrote a book called Radical Acceptance: The Secret to Happy Lasting Love, published by Simon & Schuster. And then, as you know, because you were a guest on my pod, about 5-6 months ago, my team and I started a podcast called Open Relationships, Transforming Together. And my deep belief is that relationships provide a really wonderful and terrible forge for us to heal. And I say terrible, I mean, I'm joking, but it's like, it can be so hard. I mean, it is, whether it's again, parenting or spousal relationships or friendship or, to your parents or, parent to child. For me, when I think about all the great books that I've read, and I continue to read these books and watch my favorites on TikTok and Instagram, I always think of that activity as kind of in a lab, right? It's like easy to consume and go, oh, that makes so much sense. I got it. But then if you go into the wild, into the kitchen and have an argument with your husband or your coworker says something that just makes you bristle, it's like, okay, now I'm out in the wild and I've read all the books and I've watched all the Instagrams. Now what am I going to do differently? So I, for one, have just, have really been a passionate sort of zealot kind of podcast host to try to help people just do better and have those hard conversations and be more open and be more curious. And, between the vast amount of research, I think about the Grant and the Glueck studies out of Harvard and on and on. I mean, I feel like there's so much data out there that make that case for the quality of our relationships. I think it was Esther Perel or maybe Brene talking about the quality of our relationships dictate the quality of our lives. But even I think a lot of people are still not aware that physiologically, there is so much data. I mean, Arthur Brooks talks about this, so much data that talks about how our relational wellness impacts us emotionally, mentally, and physiologically.
Right. Mm-hmm. So when I was on your podcast, Open Relationships, which is beautiful, you did such a nice job of curating really wonderful guests and, creating really welcoming space. But when I was on your show, we talked about really pretty much everything under the sun. And one of the things we talked about was the value of repair. And I had shared a story with you about
I love that story.
Yeah, circling back to my son on a conversation that we'd had 5 years ago that he actually didn't remember. It was one of these, what I'd share with you is it was one of these things in my sort of file cabinet of, things I can go through and I really want to beat myself up. There was a memory I have of Brian about 5 years ago of a way I handled an interaction with him. And so I brought it back up to him and he didn't consciously know the moment, but when he listened to me share the story, he got in touch with like how yucky that must have felt to him in the moment. And we had this pretty cool, pretty special repair that I appreciate that he was available for. So when I shared that with you, you gave yourself an assignment. And then you said, okay, Alexandra, make sure you check in with me about this assignment when I come on your show. So you had said that you were thinking about maybe approaching somebody or somebody's in your life and just saying something along the lines of like, listen, I'm striving to love you well and to love you as well as I can love you. But there are probably times when I fall short or I miss the mark that I want to have for me and for us. And is there something that you want to process with me or bring to my attention? So I want to ask you now, Andrea, what do you think? How'd you do on your,
oh my gosh, I'm impressed with your memory.
Well,
no, I love that. And I've actually shared that story with other people. And I think that is the kind of thing that it's often so hard and uncomfortable to be wrong. Right. But, and we just think, oh, it's easier to sweep under the rug, but it's really not. Right. And how we heal ourselves and how we create connection and trust ultimately is through vulnerability. And I feel like in a way it's cliche, but it must be done and it must be said again and again because not enough of us do it. And I know that because even I, who is just such a zealot for this stuff, still I'm like, oh, there's still room for growth, and then I talk to my friends and I make observations. And so anyway, I love that story, Alexandra, and thanks for sharing it again. And so I actually did that with my sons, interestingly. And so I said to my 14-year-old something to that effect, I want to do a better job of meeting you where you are. And what are the one or two things that I can do that would make our relationship better? So he thought about it for a moment and he said he's 14 and can be really impulsive and really intense. He's got some health issues. So there's just, kind of just some broader circumstances where he'll get pretty angry about things. And often they're not even that reasonable or seemingly material. I'll be relatively calm when he does that, but I won't often back off. And I'll say like, you can't talk to me like that, and you're going to lose your phone, and da 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 da. And my husband and I have agreed so many times, like when our kids are dysregulated, thou shall not escalate, right? Take the Hippocratic oath. And so when I asked him about this, he said, what I want you to do is when I'm upset and freaking out, I want you to back off. And no matter what I've said to you, no matter how terrible I was, now I'm kind of paraphrasing, I just want you to back off. I just want you to leave me alone. And I've had a hard time doing that, but because that wasn't intuitive to me. And so I've done a much better job. I admit I'm not perfect at it, but in the spirit of I asked you what you wanted from me. Now I'm going to try really hard to honor it. But as you can imagine, when your child is being really aggressive and seemingly out of control, at least my impulse is to say, that's not okay. Set those boundaries. I don't want you talking to your girlfriend like that in 10 years or whatever. But what he's saying to me, and again, there, some not mitigating circumstances because I don't want him to build a habit where he thinks he can speak like that. But I also feel like this isn't going to last forever. And we as a family, to the extent that we're saying, hey, you've had this, now's not the time when you're freaking out to try to teach you anything other than, hey, let me help you calm down. Or, if your best way to regulate yourself is without me, then I really do want to honor that. It's been hard, but it's also, again, back to my uninvited Buddhas. It's like, okay, let me honor that. And so then I asked the same question of my 11-year-old, and he was like, can I think about it and get back to you? I'm like, dude, I'm just asking you, like this isn't a big, not a big, PhD project over here. And I said, well, this is what Nicholas is the name of my older son. This is what Nicholas said. He asked me when he's freaking out to just really back off. And my younger guy, Alex, was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good.
I'll take that. I'll take that one as well.
I'll take that. Yeah. And so, I mean, I felt really good about just even asking the question. It feels like a really good question to ask.
I love the answer that your 14-year-old gave you, and then that your 11-year-old co-signed.
Right. Yeah, co-signed on that.
And I heard, as you're talking about, like, kind of, I think it's such a wonderful insight. 'Cause I think I would be hard pressed to find a teen that wouldn't want that. I think that what your kids want is something that all of our teens want, which is that when I'm freaking out, don't have that be the moment that you hold up the mirror, and ask me to look at my behavior and talk about consequences. And because that capacity just isn't there in the moment. And I loved how you talked about what gets in your way. And I can so relate to that. Like, if I don't hold up the mirror right now, if I allow this behavior, then what happens 10 years from now, this girlfriend, or I go into rewind mode of we're having this moment because I didn't do this when he was 7 or 8 or 9. So that kind of fast forwarding and rewinding that we do as parents keeps us from meeting the moment. And in the moment, what your son is saying is, I just need space. The ultimate so that I can learn how to manage strong feelings, without you, Mom, managing it on my behalf with a threat or with a,
consequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and just even listening to you, Alexandra, repeat that back to me, and thank you. I mean, what is it but fear? I'm afraid that in 10 years, you're going to be a jerk to your girlfriend and it's going to lead to more heartache. I'm afraid blah, 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 right? I mean, not that I'm consciously thinking when I'm meting out consequences, I'm not consciously thinking fear, but let's face it, so often it is, I mean, the vast, vast, vast majority of the time, we end up behaving in a way that doesn't serve us because we are fearful rather than, so in that space of fear rather than wisdom. So yeah, I feel like it's like that if you can create that scaffolding when you're calm and in your wisdom, then when you're ready to freak out and behave fearfully again, at least you've kind of created a scaffold and a framework that says, okay, don't keep doing that old thing because that old thing didn't serve you. Like, I can't tell you the feeling of guilt that I've had by failing my kids, like getting really mad at them. And I'm like, oh my God, they are, for whatever reason, really upset and I'm making it worse. And that sucks. Like, and that's not my jam. Right. And I know I speak for a lot of parents, like, because then we get triggered because that is some of the stuff that didn't get healed for us. So that, when I think about how kids enable us to reparent ourselves as adults and give ourselves a do-over and be more compassionate. I mean, it reminds me, even as you were describing or noticing kind of that perfectionistic tendency and how dehumanizing that is. I feel like when we get triggered as parents, because that's what we're used to give ourselves the time and space to do it better. And I feel like something that I've felt so guilty on is like, I know better. And then and I screw it up. And then I feel so guilty and so stupid and so ashamed. And so in talking to you, I'm like, what I need to tell myself is every time I'm getting a little bit better and I'm more aware of it. Right. And it's such a journey to unwind that really early imprinting. And guess what? It's not even for me to be imprinted, at a young age. It's like all that imprinting that was handed to me from generations, right? All the imprinting that was handed to all of us from generations of people that overreacted and were stressed out and yelled. I love I don't know if you're familiar with Eli Harwood, but she's wonderful. Somebody that contributes to Your Tango and has a huge following of her own. She talks about the difference between helping a child calm down versus shut down. And she'll say, you know what,
Yeah.
you can yell at a
Ooh.
kid and you
Sure.
can threaten them and
Sure. They'll
they'll
stop.
yeah, they'll stop, but they are not calming down. They are shutting down. And that was a big that phrasing was so helpful to me because I'm guilty of that. And I'm only saying it not because I like to embarrass myself in front of anybody, but I say it in real service to other parents who say, "Oh my gosh, me too." And for us as really well-intentioned, loving parents to say, how can I really help my child sincerely calm down? Because yelling and threatening, like none of that ever helps. It's like, first of all, because we're so physiologically connected, like our nervous system, this idea of co-regulating, like when I'm freaking out, my kids are going to freak out, even if I'm saying through gritted teeth. So when I think about it is so much unwinding that's happened for me. And I know this is the case because there's just so much hurt and heartache at best. And then, obviously abuse, kind of at the worst. So when I think about giving ourselves as parents the permission to continue to practice, to get it right, for us to be gentle and patient with ourselves and calm down. And hey, I'm doing better. Okay, I'm not perfect, but I'm better. And to notice that and give ourselves that positive feedback because nobody else does.
That's
Alexander, is there
right. No,
somebody
that's
who's
right.
telling you what a great
That's
mom you
right.
are? I doubt it.
That's right. Well, especially on this one though, because like when you step away, like in a moment with your son, when you step away as he's freaking out, it is the absence of something. You are doing less. And so I think those can be the ones that are especially hard for us to notice or for others to notice. So my hope is that when you step away and give him the space that he's asking you for, that you really do like land that for yourself, and like let it sink in. Like how loving it is, right? How loving it is to give your kid the thing that he has asked for. And it doesn't mean that you leave that moment where it was, right? I can imagine, and I'm sure that you do, like circling back then when you guys are calm on a walk later, kind of having a debrief, like that. Then we're not asking or suggesting that you just let go and let anything be any old way.
Yeah, like you can be really disrespectful and that's okay. But you're right. And I'm glad you raised that. That's a critical point that you raised. We absolutely circle back. And when we're all calm, in fact, my younger son just was upset. Oh, yesterday he was really upset about like getting to the team on time, basketball game on time. It's just like some, kind of not important drama. I mean, important to him, but like getting to the basketball game on time. And there was some confusion around that. And he really was uptight and being his bonnet. And so today when I was chatting with him, I just asked, hey, do you think that, because he apologized. I said, well, do you feel like did that make things better or worse as you freaked out? And he was like, worse. I'm like, yeah, I know. And I really try to communicate to him that if he can try to remember that next time, and it's for all of us. I mean, we get him triggered and our nervous systems need to be reprogrammed, but it does feel like there is something that is happening when we do that circling back, when things are calm and affirming to each other. And in some cases, he apologized to me. A lot of times it's me apologizing to them saying, you know what, I got really upset and I said something I didn't mean, or I mess it up. And I feel like I've got this really wonderful bond with my sons that there's just a lot of trust because we take the time to make the repairs and to be accountable, but it's a journey for sure.
It's a journey for sure. And it's one, I'm sure every generation feels this way, but whenever I'm talking to, a group of parents or thinking about my own parenting journey, like I think it's really important for us to remember that our kids are inheriting a really different world than the one that we lived. And so in that way, I think it's on us to forever contextualize their emotional responses within this context that we don't and we can't fully understand. We didn't grow up with TikTok in our hands and coming out of a global pandemic and all of the things that they are, and being afraid of gun violence in their schools, like all of the things that they're navigating that no matter, that sort of exists separate and apart from our parenting. So there are factors that are converging on our kids that are shaping their capacities, that are kind of beyond anything that we're trying to do. And that we then have the opportunity to be that much more of an asset and like that kind of soft place to land.
Well, totally. And let's face it, when I think about just how much the world has changed, and I feel like it's so cliche, but I just feel like when I was growing up and for the generations before, it was like, suck it up. And like, you got to get out there and get on the farm or, like get out there and make it happen and so forth. And it feels like that was a very different, not survival necessarily, but kind of just like you say, like a very different time and place in terms of what's expected for kids. I mean, it feels like it was much, there was like so much more external, whereas now our kids, I feel like in a lot of ways are growing up more slowly. I feel like a lot of us are guilty of coddling our kids and not imposing the kind of things that we had to do in growing up. And you're right, it's a very different world. And to the extent that hey, just suck it up and, toe the line and get your work done, I feel like it did a lot of damage,
That's right. Yeah. But so many of us we're not going to go back. We can't unknow what we know. You certainly can't unknow what you know, because you've been in this for so many years. So Andrea, I am looking at our time. I cannot believe how quickly this is all gone. This has been a wonderful.
There's so much more to talk about, Alexandra.
I know. We need one of those. I need one of those 3-hour long podcasts.
I know, we totally do. Well, I would love to come back on your show, and needless to say, I'm eager to have you back on mine. So we'll hopefully be able to just keep the kind of on-air conversation as well as the off-air conversation.
Yeah. So tell people how do you want people to kind of get into your ecosystem? Where can people find you? Where can people learn more from you and learn more with you?
Yeah. Well, the first and foremost, our main publishing and media platform is called YourTango, YourTango, YourTango.com. Unbelievable. A ton of just great content. And then we've got YourTango presence on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook. And then what I'm so proud of is my podcast, Open Relationships Transforming Together. We have a partnership with iHeart, plus we're on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Open Relationships Transforming Together. And we are hosting in June, our first ever Revolutionizing Your Relationships Summit. So that page isn't up yet, but it will be soon. Our goal is to address relationships in 5 or 6 key areas, from romantic relationships to parenting, to work, self, friendship, you name it. And just recognizing, again, relationships are the water we swim in. And we really want to provide stories and practical insights and how-to so that our audience can make those changes. To me, it's all about taking action and then giving yourself permission to make it a practice and not try to make it perfect, but make progress in time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for all of the good work you've done over,
thank you.
A couple of decades to just continue to share and celebrate, really wonderful, wise voices in the world of love and relationships. So
thank you.
So nice to be with you. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea, for joining me here on Reimagining Love. If you want to engage with Andrea's work, I'll put lots of links for you in the show notes. Thank you for joining me here today. Until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.